Okay. Gurudev?
Good morning.
Okay, I can hear you. So how are things? Is there anything that you'd like to share? It's good to see you.
Things are good. It's beautiful here this time of year, Northern California. And we're busy with the property itself, the grounds, the gardens, the setting, and the cows. Reorganizing a few things, and it's feels good to do that. Chitahari, who has relocated nearby, is now moving into the ashram. That's very positive, and he's one of the original members of Audarya, and the main person behind the building of the Gorvijay Mandir here, out of the redwoods from the forest floor that we milled on site some years back, and so forth. So we have a nice group, and work on my book is continuing, editing and so forth, and meanwhile we're also developing further with Darshan Press overall. Darshan Press, of course, is publishing my book, but Krishna has been able to engage some other devotees from the Sangha in different aspects of the publishing. So there's a lot of, I guess, infrastructure type work going on that's not visible at the moment, but it's promising. One of the things that's just coming to the surface in that regard is the audiobooks. Sacred Preface is now in progress, so that's good. This way overall everything is positive, and I think that we're developing a setting here at Audarya in a way that can serve the community overall the most, which is originally what it was designed to do. So I feel good about that. What are the questions this morning?
Okay. So now there's 7 questions, and so it was requested that you repeat the question because sometimes certain devotees can't hear it. So after the question is asked.
I think devotees who listen through Facebook or something like that, they can't hear the questions. So
yeah,
I should repeat the English questions as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like repeat them in English.
Okay.
I think that's
Spanish.
what
Spanish ones. I think the Spanish ones need to be repeated. Anyway, I can repeat them all.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's what is that what you meant, Guru Vakya? Yes. Because Guru Vakya was the Spanish. Okay. Repeat the Spanish ones. Okay.
Just the Spanish ones.
Just the Spanish ones. Okay. So Pranada is first.
Hare Krishna. Let's see. I recently heard someone say that Krishna is only Svayam Bhagavan when he is with Radha. Not even his Svayam Bhagavan feature is not even when he's with Balaram. I'm taking that to be something like maybe what we hear like in the Rasa dance, where Krishna is with Radha and his expansions are with the gopis. Either that, or maybe it's referring to Krishna's being eternally of the Kaishore age. I'm not sure, but it struck me as odd because we think of Svayam Bhagavan as having 3 relationships, as the son of Yashoda and Nanda, and the brother of Balaram and friend of the Gopas, and the lover of Radha and the gopis. Could you comment on this thing that I heard?
Yes. I think that may not be the best way to say what could be said about that. I think that what is, you could say instead, which might be a more accurate way of expressing what perhaps is behind that, would be to say that there are features of Krishna that shine, that Krishna as the Godhead, he shines, if you will, or, well, let's say the influence of his Swarup Shakti, that internal energy, the measure of its influence distinguishes, for example, in one sense, Brahman from Bhagavan. So in Brahman, this Swarup Shakti is not really active in any, comparatively to the way it is in Vaikuntha and in Goloka, that much more. So the more that the Swarup Shakti is having influence, the more light there is being shed on all that Krishna is. And so because Radha is the Mahabhav Swarupani, the fullest expression of the Swarup Shakti, then standing next to him, arguably, he shines in a light that is brighter than any other expression of the Swarup Shakti. That said, all expressions of the Swarup Shakti within Braj, which is his, in Goloka, Gokul, which is his private residence, where in order to be, if you will, the lover of Radha, he has to be someone's son. And in order for him to be the lover of Radha, also he has to have some friends, some of whom are in Sakhibhav, to use Rupa Goswami's term. And without the influence of the Sakhis, gopis, and arguably those friends as well, as is clear from the Leela Granthas of the Goswamis, he can't be standing next to Radha. How does he stand next to Radha without the help of Subal on occasion, or without the help of Radha's friends and maidservants and so forth? And how can there be the sweetness of the Parakiya that underlies the meeting of Radha and Krishna, where they stand together? How can there be Parakiya without the sentiments of Vatsalya that would ostensibly be prohibit such and serve thereby as the required obstacle for Parakiya to be all that it is, to be as intense, if you will, as it is. So the other sentiments, the other bhavas of Braj besides Madhurya, and within the context of Madhurya, besides Radha herself, if you will, they're all necessary for Krishna to stand next to Radha. So there's kind of really a composite there. When Radha meets Krishna at Kurukshetra, then she can't be satisfied with him there, or with the idea of going with him to Dwarka, because the setting of Braj and all of these other sentiments that I mentioned, and the setting itself with the Jamuna and Govardhan and all that Braj is constituted of, then she doesn't want to stand next to Krishna. So in the broader sense, yes, Krishna standing next to Balaram, Krishna standing next to, tied up by Yashoda is Svayam Bhagavan. It's not another expression of Krishna. It's not Mathuresh Krishna or Dwarkesh Krishna. It's said by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Ujjvala Nilamani that Krishna is perfect in Dwaraka. He is more perfect in Mathura and most perfect in Braj. Now, if you want to go, within that, he's most perfect standing next to Radha, you could say. And I think that's what people who say what they said to you that your question is about want to say, but I don't think that it's entirely accurate to say that only that Krishna is Svayam Bhagavan, and by contrast, Krishna standing next to Balaram is not. To give another example, Radha is speaking in Venu Gita, the 22nd, I think, or 21st chapter of the 10th book of the Bhagavad. And Radha and gopis, but together, and they describe the vision of Krishna and Balaram entering the forest with their friends and cows to be the perfection of the eyes. Sanatana Goswami, there are different comments on it, but Sanatana Goswami comments that through the eyes of the gopis, Krishna, along with Balaram, is particularly attractive because of the way in which the elder brother feels about him, that's expressed in that vision as well. So there are other, like as I say, there are other commentaries on it that render the verse grammatically such that they're really only talking about Krishna, not Krishna and Balaram. But I've given you Sanatana Goswami, he's the original commentator from the Gaudiya Sampradaya, his perspective on that. So, and that is that the perfection of the eyes for the gopis is to see Krishna, Balaram, and his friends. And it is the Krishna whose activities in Braj are reported to Radha by one of her attendants when she's not present, and the things that he's doing in those settings where he's not standing next to her, that's the same Krishna, very attractive to him, to her. And then that said, of course, either directly or indirectly, everyone in Braj wants to see Radha standing next to Krishna, standing next to Radha. Certainly Yashoda wants to see Krishna standing next to Radha, and she does at times. Krishna's intimate friends as well, labor hard to make that happen. So I think that there's something to be said for the idea that Krishna standing next to Radha, that he shines most completely in relation to the most complete, fullest manifestation of the Swarup Shakti, Mahabhav Swarupni. What does Kabiraj Goswami say? He says, Rasaraj Mahabhav Duyekurupa. The two, Rasaraj, Krishna, the king of love, and Mahabhav, Radha herself, the fullest expression of love, these two come together, they result in one form, a group that is, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So I think there's, in substance, there's what devotees want to say by that is has some support, but it would be incorrect to say that Krishna in Braj otherwise, in relation to Yashoda, Nanda, the cowherd friends and so forth, is not Svayam Bhagavan. If he's not Svayam Bhagavan, then who is he? Rupa Goswami gives an explanation of Svayam Bhagavan. Tadikatma Rupa is by Bhav Prakash in the form of Balaram. His Prakash is amongst many gopis, where he expands during the rasa dance to be with each one of them at the same time, and so forth. Similarly, he has expansions to be sit next to each cowherd boy, for example, in Sakyaras while taking lunch, as if each one thinks he's sitting next to me or across from me alone, and so forth. But those expansions of himself in those settings are expansions of Svayam Bhagavan. There's no other explanation, ontological explanation of who Krishna standing next to Balaram is, as opposed to who Krishna standing is next to Radha. Rupa Goswami doesn't give any other term than Svayam Bhagavan. So I think the use of the term is a little loose, but the idea that Krishna standing next to Radha shines in a way that is arguably the fullest expression of himself. Yes, to your point, that would refer to the Kishore Leela in general. So that's another way of thinking about it. But from that, if you want to emphasize that point, then standing next to any other gopi, standing next to Rupa Manjari, he's not Svayam Bhagavan. Rupa Manjari is not Radha, like Radha, but not Radha, close as you could get, but in one sense, Tadbhav, but it's really his bhav is really a sympathetic love for the union of Radha and Krishna. So I hope that answers your question. Does it help?
Yes, very clear. Thank you.
Svayam Bhagavan, Shri Krishna, Ki Jai.
Shama Sundar.
Yes, good morning. Question: the difference between Gaudiya Sarasvat Sampradaya and Bhaktivinoda Parivar. Let me know when you've repeated the question. Well, I think that, as I've mentioned, when disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur were asked in the public what parivar they belonged to, and they weren't sure how to respond, and asked their Gurudev, he responded by telling them that they should reply that they are members of the Bhaktivinoda Parivar. When you speak of Sridhar Maharaja using the term Godia Saraswat Sampradaya, or I don't know if he said Gaudiya Sarasvat Sampradaya, but he has said some things along those lines. Obviously, it's the Gaudiya Sampradaya. It has lineages within it, streams and parivars, communities within it. Then again, of course, Sampradaya can be used in a broader sense. Jiva Swami does that in his Sarva Samvadini, where he says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the founder of his own community, I think, with streams of Sampradayas. So he's using it in a broader term, whereas the Parivar term in Gaudiya terminology tends to refer to lineages within the Gaudiya Sampradaya. And that, in that sense, the Sampradaya term is used as defining a community that is different from another Sampradaya, like the Ramanuja Sampradaya or the Madhva Sampradaya, so on and so forth. So, words have different meanings in different contexts, and so forth. But that said, Sridhar Maharaj is obviously a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and wanted to emphasize Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in describing his lineage, and the implication of which would be that there may be others who are followers of Bhaktivinoda, and there are other disciples of Bhaktivinoda that have lineages, and while they may not, they could refer to themselves as the Bhaktivinoda Parivar. They would probably tend to refer to themselves as the Nityananda Parivar, which is the Diksha line of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And the term Bhaktivinoda Parivar again comes from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is one of the disciples of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, obviously the prominent one in terms of worldwide outreach, campaign, dissemination of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And so it would seem that Sridhar Maharaj wanted to include him affectionately, and for good reason, perhaps to distinguish within those coming from the influence, under the influence of the inspiration of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, distinguish himself and his lineage from others who, at the same time that they are serving under the inspiration, guidance, even the diksha of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but are not under the influence or serving under the inspiration of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, such a prominent disciple of Bhaktivinoda. So, those are my thoughts on that. I don't think it's just too much to the topic. Other than that, does that help? No, there are others as well. There's at least one other ongoing lineage initiated. Now that I think about it, not sure if, at least there are others who are disciples of Bipin Bihari Goswami, who is a disciple of Bhaktivinoda, who is a brother of Bhaktisiddhanta, who took his diksha from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Of course, as I mentioned the other day, but yeah, there are others. We're a little different in that our lineage is coming from Bhaktivinoda and Gorkishore, who come from two different Parivars, both of whom have obviously a very prominent influence on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Took Harinam from Bhaktivinoda, took his mantra diksha from Gorkishore Das Babaji at the request of Bhaktivinoda and with the blessings of Gorkishore Das Babaji, and those influences are prominent. We respect both of them, which is our Parivar. So he gave a good answer, Bhaktivinoda Parivar. You want to say Gaudiya Sarasvat Sampradaya. Well, that's good, but understandable. But I like the mention of Bhaktivinoda himself in terms of identifying the Parivar we are associated with. Bhaktivinoda Parivar Ki Jai. Godia Sarasvat Sampradaya Ki Jai. What else?
So Martin has a question.
Okay.
It's not in the chat. Let's see. Sorry, there are a few different ones in the chat. So Shamasanar, should I just read it and that would be considered? Okay. Okay. So if you, I don't know if Gurudev you can see it if you just scroll up some. So yeah, it was at 11:29. So it says, I have one question, Pranam Maharaj. How would you differentiate the teachings you received from Srila Prabhupada and the teachings you received from Srila B.R. Sridhar Maharaj? Thank you very much.
Well, in one sense, Prabhupada taught me not to think, and Sridhar Maharaj taught me to think about all the things that Prabhupada put into my heart by stopping my mind. So it's they complement one another. In other words, Prabhupada gave his disciples so much of the teachings of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, and there wasn't a lot of time or emphasis for them to think about them in a deeper way, those teachings, because there was too much coming at one time. So, every month there was another 300-page volume of the Bhagavatam, and there were lectures every day that were recorded. To keep up with all of that, obviously you had to think about it to some extent, but we were more on the intake of new information. And Sridhar Maharaj's emphasis was to reflect upon that information and the deeper implications of them and so forth. So if I was an empty pail, then Prabhupada's teaching would be to fill it up with milk. And Sridhar Maharaj's influence would be to come and churn the milk, churn it, and bring out all the things that are hidden in milk. Maybe you know that inside of milk there is ghee, there is buttermilk. Add a little sugar, and there's burfi and sandesh and rubbery, and so on and so forth. So many treasures, gifts, they are hidden within the milk. So Prabhupada filled the bucket up with milk, and Sridhar churned the milk and taught me how to churn the milk also, which is something that Prabhupada himself also emphasized at times. As early as 1975, Prabhupada wrote in a letter to one of his disciples that I think we have enough students now. Those of you who came after 1975 can hold your breath. But at that time, he said, therefore, I think we should just churn the milk. So he had a place for that, but it didn't manifest during his presence, which was such an empowered campaign for dissemination, wide-scale dissemination. So when your dissemination is very broad, then it's difficult to go deep at the same time. So he was particularly empowered by Nityananda Prabhu, whose campaign amongst the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who were all involved in the dissemination of what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was about. Nityananda Prabhu's campaign was characterized by being broad, wide spread. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Nityananda Prabhu not to return to Puri one year. They were coming annually for the Rath Yatra and to meet with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but he told them rather to stay in Bengal and deliver the mercantile community and so forth, which he did. So Prabhupada's campaign was empowered by Nityananda Prabhu, and it has that characteristic of being very broad. We don't find, for example, literary contributions of Nityananda Prabhu going into theological depth as to all the implications of the teachings. We find that in the books of Jiva Goswami, for example, Rupa Goswami. But in this way, different associates of Mahaprabhu were empowered in different ways to, as a composite, make for a wholesale distribution of Krishna consciousness. And all of the elements are required. So you need the breadth of wide-scale distribution, and you need theological depth, and so on and so forth. So Krishna empowers different devotees in different ways, and Prabhupada was particularly focused on broad, wide-scale dissemination and giving new information that had never been heard before in other parts of the world. So there wasn't a lot of time to, as it turned out, to boil the milk, but in his absence, that is at the time of his passing from the world, that arguably would be a good time to reflect and connect with him through separation and longing and examining on a deeper level all that he gave and so on and so forth, rather than just continuing with some wide-scale dissemination. That's not a bad thing, the latter, but as much as in his own presence, he emphasized that there is a place for boiling the milk. That would have been a good place, a pause, if you will, in the wide-scale dissemination. And what are we disseminating? What just happened to us? Under the influence of Prabhupada, magically for years, we were just taken up and didn't think about anything except he said it and we do it, and that's what it is, and so forth. So this is a perfect time to pause, and by the transcendental system, if you will, Pujapad Sridhar Maharaja arrived on the scene, invited by Prabhupada himself to be a very good churner of the milk. So I would look at it in a broad way like that in terms of the two influences. To put it in another sense, Prabhupada engaged me largely in wide-scale dissemination of Krishna consciousness. He was very pleased with the circulation of his books. And in order to please him, I involved myself in that. And he expressed his appreciation for that and so forth. But under the influence of Pujapad Sridhar Maharaja, I was encouraged to do what he called relief work. That was, rather than to bring in new devotees as a focus, to focus on devotees who have already come within the fold, but whose understanding may not be that deep, and who may be troubled by the circumstances surrounding Prabhupada's passing in the society of ISKCON, and dealing with new leadership and so on and so forth. It was a challenge. So to do relief work, that people who had come would not go away, they would understand better the depth of what they were involved in, and to help them become more grounded in the teachings and so forth. So those are two kind of different emphases: emphasis for wide dispensation, emphasis for boiling the milk. Hope that helps. What else? So no, well, the answer is no. They're not two different missions. Shamsundar, are you there? So no, they're not two different missions. And let me give you an anecdote that will underscore that. Prabhupada wanted that his disciples would build a house in Mayapur. Well, they were planning to build a house for Prabhupada in Mayapur. And he suggested that they build a second story where Sridhar Maharaj could come and live. They would bring him from Navadvip and he would reside there, and that he could bring then people from all over the world to Mayapur, and they could hear from Sridhar Maharaj. Prabhupada expressed this and expressed it to Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj himself, saying that I would like to ask my disciples to do this, and then you could come and stay there. And I'll even have an elevator so that you don't have to trouble yourself going up the stairs, and everything will be arranged perfectly for you to sit only. And I'll bring people from all over the world. They can hear from you. Prabhupada expressed a desire to do that. Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj thought he must be kidding or something. I'm older than him. I'll surely pass away earlier. And it's a very nice invitation. Let me think about it. Prabhupada later reflected upon it and thought, well, there may be some problems. Some of my god brothers are envious. They may come. That could be a problem. So the idea didn't play itself out. And suddenly Prabhupada passed from the world unexpectedly before Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj. But Prabhupada wanted considered Sridhar Maharaja his Siksha Guru, he wrote in a letter when one of his disciples had been in India and Prabhupada had not been there for some time early on in the mission. And he asked Prabhupada if there was someone he could get some association from, a Siksha Guru in Prabhupada's absence. And Prabhupada said that he could take shelter of Sridhar Maharaj as a Siksha Guru. He said, what speak of what you can learn from him, I accept him as my Siksha Guru. So, same mission. But the same mission may be expressed in different ways. Like I mentioned, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was one mission, but Nityananda Prabhu was expressing it, serving it differently than Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami, Gadadhar, serving it in a different way. Each of them have their own contribution. We can speak about each of them associates as being the most important, and they're all the most important. So similarly with Prabhupada and Sridhar Maharaj. What else?
So Abai has a question. I don't think he's on a cell phone, so I don't think that we could hear him if he was speaking just because of the channels.
Yeah.
So I think that he texted me the question. Okay, yeah, here it is. Okay, my question for Guru Maharaj is, my question is if Guru Maharaj can speak about how to deeper understand what Mahaprabhu's angle of vision is in regards to what we always hear. Krishna in the mood of Radha. I am trying to understand, is Mahaprabhu truly feeling exactly as Radha and longing for Krishna exactly as she does, or is it more of a third party longing and understanding from Radha's perspective? It's hard to word this properly, but my main question is if he can speak on what it means Krishna is in the mood of Radha.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that obviously Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna, but he is trying to step into the shoes of Radha and experience himself from her vantage point. And in the context of the Leela, he has glimpses of that. And in the end, he is successful. In the last verse of Shikshastakam, which is explained by Krishnas Kaviraj at the end of Chaitanya Charitamrita, at the end of his book, very end, he cites the Shikshastakam verse after verse and gives a brief explanation of it in such a way that it's clear that Krishnas Kaviraj Goswami is connecting the verses of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as if they were written successively in one astakam, with one verse leading to the next and so forth. That's not the way Rupa Goswami depicted the Shikshastakam. He cites verses of the Shikshastakam, for example, in his Padyavali, places the verses under different categories along with other verses. But in Krishnadas, Kaviraj Goswami's writing, we find that the 8 prayers are taken together as an astakam and perhaps referred to as such, Shikshastakam, for the first time there. But in the last verse, significantly, the last verse of Shikshastakam, he says, and this verse, Krishna says, this verse was spoken by Radha. So the implication is that Mahaprabhu was successful. He's actually entered into the bhava of Radha. Yes, he is Krishna, that's a fact. But he's in the bhava of Radha, and he's experiencing firsthand what she experiences, to at least to some extent, as far as possible, when she sees Krishna, reflects upon Krishna, loves Krishna, and so forth. Now, I don't know how well that answers your question, but as far as I understand it, you're asking if that's what happens, or is there some kind of a, third person examining the thing? Maybe you could say there's a little of both in the earlier stages. Like I say, it's coming in and out. But I mean, to say that also the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Krishna is true, obviously. But the fact that he is Krishna is not something that, given the Leela, he's always aware of either. He identifies himself as a sadhaka and in the pursuance of the bhava of Radha or Madhurya Rasa, worshiping Krishna. He is Krishna. He understands that. Sometimes that knowing is overridden by the influence of Bhakti, Swarup Shakti, and the sweetness of knowing himself otherwise. For example, as sadhaka, it takes over. So he's moving between the two, but in the end, he's successful in stepping into the bhav of Radha. So much so that, as I say, the last verse of Shikshastakam and the words of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami are the voice of Radha herself. So, hope that answers your question.
I guess it does. Hopefully.
Well,
Yeah.
he's here. We can talk with him further.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too.
So.
Cool. So Chaitanya Charan had a question, and I'm wondering if that one's in the chat too.
I don't see it.
You didn't see it. Do you have it,
Prabhu,
Shama
estoy aquí.
Sundar?
Igual.
I think he's speaking.
Samasundar. ¿Me escuchas? Ok, entonces voy a plantear mi pregunta ahora. Ya. Es que es muy larga. Es un poco extensa. Por eso no la quise escribir antes. Ya. Ok.
Question.
Okay. Or is it? Okay.
I see another brief question. Says, if you have a prayer asking for health, is it okay to ask Krishna or better to turn to another form of the Lord? In the Bhagavatam, in the second canto, different manifestations of divinity in this world, gods and goddesses, are mentioned as deities to propitiate for want of one thing or another. Sun god, Vayu, the wind god, god and goddess, and so on and so forth. But the section concludes with the statement, akama, sarvakama va, moksha kama udharari, tibrena bhakti yogena, yajeta purushottam. Whether you have no desires, akama, sarvakama va, or va, you have all kinds of material desires. Akama, sarvakama va, moksha kama, or you have a desire for moksha. So in either case, in any case, akama, sarvakama va, moksha kama udaradi, tivrena bhakti yogena, yajeta purusham param. In either case, your best foot forward is to engage in bhakti yoga in the service of Purushartha, Purushottam, Lila Purushottam. Okay. Anyway, Krishna, serve Krishna. It's best to serve Krishna. So why is that? That we taught you to not to pray to Krishna for material desires. The point there is that we should not have material desires as our goal in and of themselves, and thus propitiate other deities for that purpose as an end. But if we have as an end goal to attain Krishna prema, but we have material desires at the same time, it's still better for us to ask Krishna to fulfill the material desires, because, or in any case, even if you don't have, I should say, Krishna prema as your goal, the Bhagavatam teaching more or less is better to take shelter of Krishna and ask him to fulfill, even though it's kind of stupid to ask Krishna to fulfill material desires when he could give you prema. To ask, what did Dhruva Maharaj say? I was looking for broken glass and I found a valuable jewel. I wanted a kingdom bigger than Brahma's. That's like a broken glass. But I took shelter of Vishnu for that purpose. And instead of the broken glass, I got a valuable jewel. So better to take shelter of Krishna. Because the very tendency to take shelter of Krishna, if that comes within us, that is more of a gift, more of a gain, I should say, than that which you're asking for. That's health of the soul, looking for health of the body. Approach Krishna. You may get it, you may not, but it's healthy for your soul. So the more that we can develop the tendency to take shelter of Krishna, the better our position becomes. Another question?
Did Chaitanya Chan write his question out? Oh, yeah, here we go.
I see it now. It's in Spanish. You're going to have to read it in English again, too. I'm not sure what it is. But go ahead, say it in Spanish. What does he say that what does he say that the Bhakti Sandarbha says? Mhm. Mhm. Well, first of all, I don't know what edition of the Bhakti Sandarbha you're reading from. And I would have to look at the Sandarbha itself, that section, to get a context of what Jiva Goswami is saying. I see he says Bhanu Swami's edition. It's not the definitive edition, it's in English, but it's not bad, I wouldn't say. There are much worse translations. But at any rate, I would have to look at it to see the context, but I don't think there's something particularly special or unique or different, peculiar that he's saying there. The text that he's citing is emphasizing the affirmation that I'm a servant of Krishna. Only by affirming that oneself is a servant of Krishna can one attain perfection. I mean, obviously, if you just say that without any context, whatnot, one could say, well, what about Narayan? What about, Varaha? What about Narasimha rather than Krishna? You could very well, be using the term Krishna as Rupa Goswami does in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu when he defines bhakti. And he says, Krishna Anushilanam, it's favorable service to Krishna. And of course, in the further explanation of the verse, Krishna means also the different manifestations of Krishna, his different avatars, Narayan and Vaikuntha, and so on and so forth. Service to them is also favorable service to them is also bhakti, uttam bhakti. So I don't think there's, and basically he seems to be saying you can only get perfection by taking shelter of Krishna in one form or another, and that will determine to one extent or another the nature of the perfection, whether it be in Dasya Rasa, whether it be Aishvarya Bhav, or whether it be the Madhurya Bhavas of Braj, Sakya, Vatsalya, so forth, Madhurya. What else? That's right. Oh. That's what, yeah, okay, well, that's a little different, but that may be very well what the Sandarbha says. There are other ways that you can attain perfection with a mixed bhakti, and you can attain with Gyan Mishra Bhakti. Bhakti is a secondary, manifesting in Sattva-guna. And through Gyan, you can attain Brahma Sayuja, and so on and so forth. Difficult process, and other methods that are advocated also for attaining perfection, but simply by taking shelter of Krishna, that alone, one can attain perfection. Yes, that makes sense. Okay, well, we're out of time. I don't know if I guess we didn't get to all the questions, but
We got to most of them.
hopefully we'll be back next week and answer more then. Thank you all much.
Thank you. So before everyone goes, I'm just going to announce the July classes. I don't think there's anything else for me to announce. Is there Archana besides the classes? I don't know. I think it's just the classes.
No, I think
Okay.
that's it.
So
yeah.
just going to go over the July schedule. So on Mondays, Padmanabha Swami is giving classes on the Brahmara Gita, the Song of the Bumblebee. And then on Tuesdays, Ashram Maharaj is giving classes for Vaishnav Sampradayas, a brief intro into the schools of Bhakti. Then on Wednesdays, Dulal is giving classes. Sorry, I'm really tired. On Krishna Sandarbha. And then on Thursdays, Archana is giving class. So she's doing her interviews, The Beauty and Messiness of a Sadhaka's Journey. And then on Fridays, Krishna Chaitanya is giving classes. Stasya, Sakya, Vaidhi, Rag. What? So what? Now what? And then on Saturday, Atula Nanda Swami is giving class on the qualities of Bhakti. And then we're back here on Sunday. So let me just check the chat to make sure. Okay, well, I'm going to go. Thank you everyone for being here. I appreciate all of you. Thank you. Okay, Haribo.